Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second of 3 virtual conferences that we and our partners in Ukraine are putting together on the title of Rehousing Ukraine. Last week's was on essentially the state of the housing and built environment in Ukraine as of a week ago. This week will be about the particular challenges of rebuilding, returning, and reforming. My name's David Smith, along with my esteemed British colleague, Derek Long. We are from the Affordable Housing Institute. We're a global nonprofit who cares about making affordable housing better all over the world. We've worked in 50 countries plus. We believe that housing is of critical importance as part of the foundation of Ukraine's rebounding from this war. And we have launched for ourselves what we're calling the Rehousing Ukraine initiative. Our objective and our goal in this is to help Ukrainians in any way that we can and that they ask us to help them. From my point of view, as someone who has worked in post-disaster situations, a lot of money will be coming toward Ukraine. A lot of advice will be coming toward Ukraine. Most money is good, most advice is good, but it's very important to develop a strategy where those things are blended from the point of view and for the benefit and with the decisions of the people of Ukraine. We also believe that it is absolutely fundamental that relief turn into redevelopment and redevelopment turn into recovery. This is not about simply patching or replacing. It's about using this as an opportunity to create a 21st century set of cities and an economy. Our series, as I mentioned, will be at least 3 panels. A week from today, we will be doing a panel on the disruption on people who are refugees or internally displaced people or dispersed families. All of this is timed to coincide with the World Urban Forum, which will be taking place nearby you folks in Katowice in Poland. We will be there at the World Urban Forum. We will be talking about this issue and trying to focus attention on it. And we will continue with our work with our good friends who are on this call on the far side of the World Urban Forum. Exactly what we cover and exactly what we address and how we do it will be guided by what we hear from all of you. So please give us feedback in any way that is convenient to you. I put my email address down there. It is not filtered. I respond to emails. Last week's panel was astonishingly good. We had esteemed speakers, 5 different esteemed speakers, and I thought I could do no better than to quote what I heard last week that made me sit up straight. A speaker said, "If you want to destroy a society's future, you don't need bombs. Just destroy homes, destroy schools, destroy livelihood, and destroy community, and you will destroy the society." Well, that cannot happen. That is not allowed to happen to Ukraine. We had excellent statistics from Kyiv School of Economics that the housing damage to date is 40 billion USD and rising, not counting lost personal property, not counting lost income, not counting disruption costs. We heard a speaker say, homes are where good people protect the vulnerable. And I think that's the way to think about it, particularly because in wartime or post-war, many more people are vulnerable than they were before. Host communities, whether they're external or inside Ukraine, they become stressed too. And purely private development will not produce genuinely affordable long-term housing. So it is essential to create changes in governance, changes in financing, changes in zoning and the regulatory and built environment. We're going to build on that today. And with that, I want to turn it over to our esteemed and able moderator, Oleh Zahnitko from Integrities.
Добрий день. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Oleh Zahnitko. I am the legal consultant for more than 20 years already. Just a couple of years ago, I've started to work with a financial consulting as well in the international law firm Integritas, that is one of the partners in organizing of the series of our webinars. And I would like to say a couple of words about our technical ideas so that in order for you to be able to listen to the specific language, you should choose the interpretation channel at the lower panel. At the tool panel of Zoom, you can see the globe-like icon. Please make sure that you will press and choose the corresponding channel, and you can then listen to our discussion in either English or Ukrainian. You can send the questions in the chats directly to me, or you can send it in the chat. We plan to have a brief discussion after each of the presentation of our distinguished panelists. And if we'll have enough time after the presentations will be delivered, we will have this brief discussion after each of the presentation. I would like to ask all of our speakers to follow the time schedule because we have five incredibly interesting presentations and we have 10 minutes for the presentation and around 3-4 minutes for the discussion after the presentation. The presentations and the recording that we're also carrying are going to be provided for the public access after we will receive the permission from all of the participants. At this, we're closing all of the technical details and let us get back to the topics of our main discussions. We're talking about rehousing, and we understand that rehousing, as of any construction, start with financial support. And as David has already said, only private participation will not resolve this issue. The state right now doesn't have a lot of money as well. And, 30 years of our existence and transition to the post-social economy to market economy has proven that we are not capable of resolving most of the problems. And starting from 2014, we also transitioning from the post-Soviet system. We also have the problem with IDPs, and it all has been carried on the shoulders of our governmental institution, volunteers, and charitable organizations, the society overall. So let us try to figure out in what way we're going to be starting the rehousing and reconstruction of Ukraine from day one, when this day one is going to be, when the credits and the loans will and the financial support will be provided again, what kind of credit and financial mix can we offer, and how we can plan the rehousing and how we can plan the housing and the urban planning for the districts that have been damaged, for those districts that need to be partially reconstructed, and for those regions when we have a lot of the IDPs right now in Ukraine that require additional districts, that require creation of the new communities and integration to the existing hosting communities. So basically, this idea of a universal house that we want to see, so we're actually testing it out every day in our life. So a couple of previous years that we had a couple of quality changes in our life. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we needed to have this accessibility to main needs in your house. So the people who used to go to the office or used to go to work, they needed to create their home office and they needed to create additional facilities in their houses. When the second phase of the war has started in 2022, so right now we've understood the importance of the fast evacuation and providing this opportunity to both access privacy and access the public services. So now we have to consider housing not only as having the roof over your head, but as a part of your social infrastructure as well, as a part of community, as part of family, as part of your own personality as well, because our home is part of us as well. Having that said, I would like to introduce you with the headliner of our panel, Ms. Svitlana Startseva, the Deputy Head of the Department of Housing and Welfare in the Ministry of Development of Regions and Territories of Ukraine. And as we have already known that this department has this role of leading this double transformation, the transforming and implementing the housing and residential policies of Ukraine. The team of the ministry is responsible for the protection of the IDP's rights and reintegration of the freed temporarily occupied territories. Svitlana has more than 30 years of experience in working in this sector, especially on the territories that unfortunately are currently occupied. So, Svitlana, we would like to pass the floor to you, please. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you. I'm pleased to welcome David, Derek, Oleh. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really pleased that I have this opportunity to participate in this panel. And as Oleh has already said, definitely the Ministry of Regional Development has a lot of responsibility on its shoulder. It's not only about the update of the legislation, but also the implementation of the new measures that have been approved. So today I would like to offer you a concept that we are following and we are using for our plans for the future, the one that we're going to be using to plan our activity in the future. We understand that we have to do some regulatory changes as well, and we have to outline our next steps to take. So I'm not going to be getting into a lot of details because I do not want to spend a lot of time. I think that you're aware of the situation that is currently held in Ukraine, where the damages and destruction that we've had, not only for the housing and residential object, but also in the infrastructure as well. So what do we have right now? Speaking about people, we've had 1.5 million internally displaced persons that have been registered before the 24th of February 2022. And right now we have more than 5 million internally displaced persons. More than almost 3 million of people have been accounted and calculated by the Ministry of Regional Development, but it doesn't mean that all of the IDPs are registered already as IDPs. So this database that our ministry has, we are unfortunately nowadays collecting the information manually. So what do we have right now? 116,000 objects with general area of 14 million square meters have been either damaged or destroyed, and they need to be renovated or reconstructed. 12,000 objects are the multi-apartment houses. We had more than 104,000 objects which were the individual private houses. 3.5 million people are without any kind of housing right now, as of today. And as of today, we started to analyze what is the character of the damages, up to 25%, the low damages or higher damages. And at this very moment, we're doing a lot of analytical work in order to calculate all of the costs. The methodology on analyzing costs and providing the cost on all of the actions that have been taken against Ukrainian Housing Fund is over 100 billion hryvnias as of now. The calculation is approximate. It's not the whole work that has been done yet. We don't have the access to the objects itself. We don't have the real information. We don't have the evaluations from the corresponding professionals in most of the objects yet. According to the previous data, the restoration of the housing that was just 25% of the damaged houses will provide us the opportunity to provide the housing for more than 1 million people. That will be 3.8 thousand multi-apartment buildings and 24,000 individual private houses. The housing for more than 2.5 million people have been either fully destroyed or have been damaged sufficiently. So it's about 30,000 of all housing objects that have to be fully restored, and more than 27,000 private houses, which used to be the homes for more than 800,000 people. But once again, those are the approximate number. We're trying to clarify the numbers every day. So right now, the 50% of overall housing that has been damaged or destroyed, that's 58,000 houses. Those are the houses that might not be restored. 52,000 of the private houses as well are in that number. At the territory of certain territorial communities, the objects of the critical infrastructure have been destroyed as well. And we understand that only restoring the residential housing without using the complex approach to restore the infrastructural object as well is impossible. And we understand the urban planning has to be done with the new approaches as well. And at this moment, the Ministry of Regional Development have already developed the bylaws on improving the procedure of the land allocation and improving the regulatory acts, understanding that we're going to be renovating and restoring the housing fund and restoring the communities. And as David has said as well, because David has mentioned here in its introductory that we need to have the complex approach, because it's not about just restoring the buildings itself, but actually rebuilding the communities. And only this complex approach can give us the opportunity to revive Ukrainian villages, communities. So we have tried to develop a certain options that will be possible for us as of today, so that we will be able to start the restoration and rehousing as soon as possible. And we have seen the three main options for us: supporting the existing approaches that presuppose the development of separate programs of providing housing for certain categories of population at the national level, regional level, and local level. But those are the outdated approaches that we've had before, and we are not trying to put a lot of attention into that. The second option would be to introduce on the state level the new mechanism of providing the need in temporary, short-term housing. And the third option would be to use the complex approach to build up the programs that will be directed to improving the housing fund. And as we understand, the third option would be the most fitting for the complex restoration and rehousing of Ukraine. What it means, optimizing the existing mechanisms for the execution of the right of our citizens to have a house, to have a residential, to have the residential place, to have accommodation, together with provided with the international support and the state support, improving the efficiency of using and allocation of the budget funds, understanding the main needs of Ukraine, considering the interest of the territorial communities, and creating the economical stimuli for all of these subjects, all of the stakeholders that will be participating in the rehousing and reconstruction processes of Ukraine. So I wanted to outline that together with working on all of the regulatory acts, we're trying to review the basics of the housing code of Ukraine, because according to the old housing code of Ukraine, so basically 98% of the housing has now turned to be private housing. And right now, due to all of these destructions, the state is now has to reimburse a lot of money for the destroyed square meters. So we've tried to develop this concept into the three main time categories. So we have the priorities, the short-term priorities till the end of 2022, the mid-term priorities till the end of 2025, which covers the restorations and the capital renovation that might be provided for those objects that can be restored, and the long-term construction up till 2032, the implementation of the right to housing based on the complex approach. In short-term perspective, so we would like to provide a free of charge transit or temporary accommodation in the institutions of the state or communal or private ownership. We have 2 decrees of Cabinet of Ministries already that give us the opportunity to compensate the accommodation, temporary accommodation of the citizens. We can compensate for the private owners of the houses, and we can compensate to the municipal and state institution as well if they will accommodate people in their locations. Then also to provide a partial reimbursement of the rent of the renters and the owners of the housing that rent out their houses to the IDPs or to the people in need. So we are now developing a program of reimbursement, the share of these housing costs. In the midterm perspective, we hope to have more premises in our housing fund that is going to be used for the temporary accommodation, actually buying them out or providing the new housing like those temporary unit houses, providing additional module constructions on the private lots. Uh, well, basically, we understand that right now the citizens of Ukraine has addressed us. Like, for example, they said, if I've had a shelter near my house, then I would already have started renovating my house on my own. So understanding that for the next 3 or 4 months before the heating season will start, we understand that this is a very urgent situation. Provide the model housing for the people on their private lots so that we'll be able to start renovation of the houses. Also, continuing the renovations of the houses or apartments with fewer damages, the capital renovations are especially used for the non-residential houses to turn them into residential houses. We're starting to have this monitoring and analysis in place of how many premises can easily and in fast time can be also turned into residential housing, the one that we can use. In the long-term perspective, we would like to continue the measures that we've started before, providing the reimbursement for all of the damages and the destruction. Today, in the Parliament, we have registered a draft law on the reimbursement mechanisms for the loss of housing, and also to concentrate our efforts on the project of the new construction, on the new urban construction. So on the development of the communities and territories, meeting the new requirements, the new environmental requirements as well. So, by the way, before the war started, the government of Ukraine has been developing a very big program on 20 billion hryvnias in order to introduce the energy efficient technologies into our construction norms. We were not able to launch it, and we understand that right now we cannot build housing that is not going to be energy efficient, is not going to be environmental friendly. So basically, today we are developing, we are finalizing our new standards, our new requirements for the new houses. So this program will give us the opportunity to resolve the main political challenges as well. First of all, giving the opportunity for our citizens to exercise their right to housing, to give the opportunity to provide the housing and accommodation for the population that has lost their houses, and to restore this housing and accommodation for the people who have their houses damaged. As of now, as a result of our program, we believe that we would like to provide a free of charge transit or temporary accommodation for the IDPs in the state or communal or private owned institutions. That would be 6,572 houses that have already been provided for the temporary accommodation. It might provide more than 400,000 places. Free of charge temporary accommodations of the IDPs in private houses. That's the one that it reimburses the rents. And we hope that more than 500,000 of IDPs will use this program as well. Partial compensation for the owners of the houses for the rent is also going to cover around 500,000 IDPs. Providing the temporary accommodation, the temporary module units on the private lots that might be used while the house is restored is also will be provided for more than 10,000 citizens, and providing the reconstructions in the deoccupied communities, in the deoccupied cities. We are now providing the renovations for the windows, for the roofs, for the doors. That is something that has to be done. It will also cover more than 1 million people. Renovation, reconstruction of the existing houses and dorms. This is something that is also planned and mostly concentrating in the west part of Ukraine, in Lviv, Rivne, Ternopil, Khmelnytsko, Chernivtsi regions. And the approximate calculation shows that we will have around 200,000 people that will be covered by this program. The procurement of the available apartments that currently are available from the developers and they're ready to be sold. This is something that we are also working on according to the law on the reimbursement of the housing. So we do believe that we might have 15,500 apartments that might be right now bought by the state in order for us to be able to provide additional housing for the people. The new construction, it is possible for us to start the new construction on more than 200 land lots. We have already analyzed it from the ministry, and we're talking about the area of more than 163 hectares. Again, most of this land is mostly located in the west of Ukraine. And we are planning to provide additional more 1 million people with housing due to the construction of the new buildings. And of course, the most important thing, the biggest problem for us is the lack of finances, the lack of financial support. We don't have enough budgeting support from that, and those territorial communities that's already being deoccupied, that definitely do not have their own budgets, they do not have their own income as well. So that is why we're hoping for additional meetings with you, with our international partners as well, so that we will be able to offer the territorial communities, the government of Ukraine as well, to participate in that, so that we might develop the co-financial mechanisms to provide additional support from the states, budgets. And I see the representatives of European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, and I see them as well joining our conversation. So we're looking forward to some offers to join participation so that we could use in the mid-term perspective and in the long-term perspective as well. At our previous meetings, I have already said and mentioned that the main task for the Ministry of Regional Development is creating the municipal communal state housing funds. So not to deliver them into the private ownership for the people of Ukraine, but to have it as the municipally owned housing that will be available for different categories of population. And right now we're developing the new provisions of our housing code, and we will be developing these norms as well. So that would briefly from my side. I'm not going to be getting more figures to you because I have given you a lot of materials I've given a lot of materials that you can read through. So thank you for your attention. I'm ready for the further participation. You know, in the Parliament of Ukraine, in the Committee of the Housing Policy, we have a working group already, the one that is working on considering all of the offers. Next week, we're going to have the first meeting there, and we're going to be considering all of the offers in order for us to convert them into the draft laws. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Svitlana. The concept that you have described, it covers a lot of issues, a lot of aspects of the rehousing, and we can discuss it a lot. Well, basically, you know, that is a concept. That's what the concept is about. Okay, so it's quite clear that, yes, if we've had an unlimited resources, that we could actually close everything straight away. Out of comments that we've had during your presentation, so I would have said it this way. So this first period of restoration of this collaboration between the ministry and the territorial communities, and how do you see this dissemination of their responsibilities? And one of the offers that have been offered in the chat is actually using the housing that is being owned by the citizens of Russian Federation or the citizens of Belarus, and kind of appropriating their property, confiscating their property, and that can be confiscated by the central government. So using this properties as well, and maybe the local communities would know better how to use this housing fund as well. A second example would be that people who return from the temporarily occupied territories, they do not start restoring their housing straight away. They're waiting for the examination to be provided, and they're waiting for the damages um, to be written and to be noted down specifically. And maybe the ministries could participate also in providing the specifically certified agencies or providing the specific teams that would help the communities that have been mostly affected, just to help us to do that before the winter comes. Yes, thank you for both of comments. Those definitely has sense and makes sense, and we understand that we don't have enough experts available to also to provide this certain evaluation, and we're ready to collaborate with the World Bank because the World Bank has offered to provide us the certified professionals on evaluating the damages for the properties. We will definitely collaborate on that. We have our contacts, so the need is very big, for sure. Collaborating with the local self-governance, we're doing that all the time. We have been already discussing it multiple times with the city associations on identifying the specific pain points of the territorial communities, what are the needs that they have. The first billion that has already been sent to the cities in questions, we have used it for the 4 regional centers that have been mostly affected. We did it to Kharkiv, Sumy, Chernihiv, and I cannot recall the 4th city at this moment. 4 regional centers, they've received the first money already to start the reconstruction. But right now, in a different department of the Ministry of Region, in the construction direction, also we have the team that is going to be providing the evaluation of the damages. We're being informed. Thank you. Thank you. Then I think we can move on. And I think that we have some questions and some offers as well, in order to create some kind of advisory group as well that might be helping out, for example, that will include the people from these panels as well. So maybe you can take a look on the chat and consider those offers as well. But let us continue with our agenda. And I would like to invite our next speaker, who's going to be talking about the housing policy as a part of infrastructure of the social services in Ukraine. So basically, that's going to be in some way also the feedback to this concept, but is actually going to be the point of view of independent consultant, because right now we have in our panel the representatives of ministries, the consultants from the international financial institutions, and independent experts as well. So we also have the representatives of the local communities. I've almost forgotten that Mykhailo is here as well. So if we cannot actually evaluate the private property in money, then, you know, as the saying goes, there is a different, what is first, the social capital or the financial capital? What is the most important? Let us try to retract this question and take this point of view, and let us ask our next speaker about that, whether our house is more important than our assets. We know that the social capital has a very important word in Ukrainian. We usually use the word welfare. You know, the components of this welfare, how to evaluate it in the social assets as well. I think we'll be able to retract this question to our next speaker, Mr. Yuriy Dzhygyr, who is currently the consultant of the World Bank, who is the responsible for the social protection. And a couple of years ago, he used to be the one who has also led the issues of social insurance because he was the Deputy Minister of Finance of Ukraine. And I'm sure that we couldn't have found better witness and participant of the transformation of Ukrainian financial and social system. So Yuriy, please, your 10 minutes start now. Yes, thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you very much. I'll try to be very brief. It's a pleasure for me to see all of you here today, and I would like to share a couple of my thoughts with you today. So now, from my experience as well, and working in private institutions and working in public institutions, is mostly about development of human capital, because I worked in education and culture and sports and social infrastructure development. And as of now, the war has either destroyed or seriously damaged the infrastructure for providing all of those services. And the destruction process, unfortunately, is being continued. The same thing we see in the housing infrastructure as well. At this very moment, I'm participating in a couple of discussions on different platforms in the sector. We are discussing the issues of how to structure and how to plan the reconstruction of the infrastructures to provide the basic services for the people, to provide them basic access to education, to healthcare, to social care, and others. You know, those discussions, they should be, and they are, the basics, and they have to be tightly connected to the discussions of how do we see the opportunities to restore and rebuild the housing fund in Ukraine as well. You know, the rehousing is the basics for developing the other strategies for the development of the human capital in Ukraine. Trying to be saying it very simple, you know, housing is not just the backbone of the modern city and the main premise for its further development. The housing infrastructure is a foundation that holds all of the networks for all of the city's institutions, of all of the services that can be provided to different sectors. In other words, in order for us to understand in what way we can restore the houses, the schools and the hospitals, we need to create the residential housing that our displaced people will get back to. This is the beginning of discussions, and I'm sure that these discussions have to be integrated with one another, be building the residential infrastructure together with the social infrastructure. And I just would like to share with a couple of thoughts that I have had while I was working in the multiple think tanks and sectoral work groups that are planning the restoration of Ukraine in social care, healthcare, and education. The first thought, that's very general, but I think it's the most important actually. Ukraine that we want to rebuild should not be the updated copy of the pre-war Ukraine. You know, the simple mechanical replication of something that has been destroyed, even if it's going to be prettier, even if it's going to be made with using the new material, you know, a shinier version made in glass and concrete of the previous infrastructure of the services that we've had, it's going to be the biggest failure that we can actually ever do. In the sector that I am working with, infrastructure sometimes takes the one of the last positions in the agenda. And how can I explain it in the other way? So, you know, when we're talking about healthcare, the building itself where the hospital is located, you know, sometimes this discussion takes a lot of attention on itself, discussing the building itself, but, you know, but the building is just the next issue. Before we start planning how we will going to reconstruct the building itself, we have to identify it clearly how the services are going to be provided. We have to step out of this paradigm that all of the services are provided by the state. We need to have a clearer understanding of what is the package of the guaranteed medical services that can be provided by the states. We need to choose the model of how the services are going to be provided. It would be best if we will use the most contemporary ones, you know, not try to linger to the legacy that we've had, but we have to understand in what way the services are being provided today. What are the new models that we can use? Then we can start to understand what kind of infrastructure we should build in order to provide the outlined services in the ways that we have outlined as well. My biggest professional anxiety in this matter, and a lot of colleagues share with the same anxiety with me, we sometimes see how this discussions gravitates towards a different center. We always thinking about these objects itself, the infrastructure. When we do not have the answers to the previous questions, we're going to get to this discussion that we have to build a new shiny building at the very same place where the previous building was, and this is how it's going to look like. It's a very tempting and easy way to do. We are avoiding the hard questions with this way. And I do believe that this is going to be really a big failure. It's definitely going to be, and not the best end to all of the situation that we currently have. Another observation that I've had, and I do believe that it might be used to the housing and the residential sector as well. We have been under this shock that our infrastructure has received right now. Our infrastructure has been hit, and we are in shock with that as well. We now can find this balance between the private sector, between the state sector, and the non-profit sector. Like, for example, in healthcare, we have like non-profits or charitable religious organization that can provide certain services as well. I think that we will see the same challenges as well with the housing sector as well, because the healthcare sector, we've already had the healthcare sector before from the Soviet times where the state dominates. And right now we have this slight understanding that the overall renovation of the sector can only be possible in collaboration. We can only dream that the state will restore all of the healthcare sector, but that will be very naive. I think we cannot avoid the increase of the role of the different actors as well. We will need to find a different balance point between the private sector and the state, especially in healthcare. From what I have heard from our colleague from the ministry, it might have the same trend from the housing sector as well, but maybe it will start from a different position. Maybe we will start to allocate the private finances as well. Or maybe state is going to take a bigger part in our housing sector right now, providing the programs for the municipal housing, for example. And as a final remark from my side, I just wanted to outline it that basically we have the brutal, dramatic destruction right now of our infrastructure that has been done by the enemy. But I'm sure we're capable to do that. We're capable to cope with that. We have to have the synergy of our powers to turn this destruction into construction, into synergy. So we have to create the modern infrastructure, modern urban spaces with providing the contemporary services to our population. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Yuriy. Well, your presentation and your speech is very good for all of the next presenters as well, because Grzegorz is going to be speaking of what legacy is and what should we preserve and what should we rebuild. Because we can take an example, Frankfurt, when they're now restoring the old quarters after they have been demolished a couple of decades ago, because they're looking for these memories as well. But again, people might say that Frankfurt only has a lot of money and people are trying to make fun of that in this way and they don't know how to spend the money that they have. That's good, but still, Yuriy, in your point of view, how do you see this new pyramid of financial support? Because if, for example, before, the private housing sector, they didn't use a lot of loans and state borrowing as well. So right now, when we don't have a lot of loans available, then most of the expenses are now going to be covered by the state. So how do you see those challenges? How do you see that? Should we wait for a couple of years to get this financial market stabilized?
Це до мене питання?
So is this a question to me? No, that's a question to Yuriy. It's a hard question. It's a hard question. It's harder for me. I think it's harder for me to provide any kind of recipes for the housing sector because the processes I'm mostly participating with is now the healthcare sector as of moment. And I do believe that the biggest hope for the healthcare sector is to engage more private capital, is to mobilize the private initiatives right now in rebalancing the participation of the state and the private services provider. One of the ambitions of our medical reform was try to equalize the rules. We understand that we were not able to fully balance the rules between the state and the private sector. So this is the open task for us. We understand that we have to provide the equal opportunities for all of the service providers. We have to equalize it and harmonize it from both regulatory and financial side, and also engaging private finances to restoration of the networks, to restoration of the healthcare systems and social infrastructural systems. We cannot avoid this discussion. We cannot avoid trying to find this balance and trying just to give it all to the state. I think it's unrealistic. You cannot do that on your own, whether state or private sector. So creating the new rules, stimulating the initiative, stimulating private participation as well, and developing tools, because the public-private partnership, even due to there are some risks, even there was a lot of criticism, but the experience of multiple countries have shown that the private-public partnership is a very good stimuli for the further-on developments. We haven't used this tool because we have had a lot of service providers in place, and we've tried to optimize the network of the service providers. So right now, without our will, without our decisions, a lot of our infrastructural networks have been destroyed. So should we restore it as it was, just like that, just to restore it and copy as it was? Or maybe should we find the new tools, and should we take this leap in developing the infrastructural grid? So we've had a lot of others countries' experiences through the PPP. So basically, it's not the only tool that is available, but the one that we can use. Yes, thank you. We will also discuss the issues of the public-private partnership. We have the speaker in the panel, but I think that Svitlana had the question. I think that I can give you just 1 minute for the comment or the question that you wanted to ask. Just one very, very brief comment. It will depend on the economy situation, the restoration of the housing, of the social services, of the medical services. It will all depend on the economical processes, on how the economy would feel itself after the war is over. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your opinion as well. We all can agree to this comment, I guess. But basically, we have to understand that for many financial sectors, for many financial institutions, those risks have become relevant after 2014, because people, they have basically forgotten about what they've had at the temporarily occupied territories. They have forgotten the property, the businesses there. And right now, all of the territory of Ukraine is basically the territory of the higher risk. So for the private capital, we can start with those assumptions that at least for most of the people, they're thinking whether they should spend money in Ukraine or they would like to find some different, more profitable jurisdictions. So I do believe that maybe we will try to listen to the point of view of our next participants. We would like to listen to Mykhailo Sapon, who is the head of the architecture department of Irpin Executive Council. And we would like to ask you in what way the community of Irpin, or maybe neighboring cities, is trying to resolve the issues that you're currently facing, because we know that the neighborhoods around Kiev, they have lost in social capital the most, and Irpin is one of the cities that requires the complex restoration of infrastructure. And the experts have said that maybe you might use the Rotterdam experience when the city has been completely rebuilt with a new planning as well. So, but maybe there are some parts of the cities that you would like to preserve. And I do believe that maybe Mykhailo, he is the person who knows the situation best from his personal point of view as well, from his professional point of view too. And, he is the recipient of the changes to the legislation, on the land provision to housing initiative. So maybe he is also the initiators of resolving certain challenges and problems that we have seen throughout these 2 months after Irpin has been liberated as well. So Mykhailo, please, I would like to pass the floor to you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this high evaluation of my role as well. I think I will switch to English if you don't mind.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for participation in this panel, and let me express from Irpin City Council and myself a great respect. I will show you a short video about Irpin, and then I will comment and will introduce the main indicators of the city and the main ways and the main problems that we faced during the Russian invasion. So I'll try to share. Так. Do you see it, the video?
Михайло, вам треба поширити екран свій.
So, yes,
Mykhailo, you need to share your screen.
Зараз одну хвилинку.
Maybe you explain in words, you think about?
I can explain in words that during the Russian invasion, a lot of private houses and apartments were damaged, and we faced the problem that approximately 3,500 buildings were damaged, and approximately half of them are totally damaged, and it's difficult to reconstruct or rebuild them. Also, I'd like to say that we count how many people has left their homes and become homeless, and it's approximately 8,000 people for nowadays. I'll try to share the desktop if I can do it in 1 minute, please.
Тепер бачимо то.
But we can already see Oleh Savchuk sharing.
Thank you, Elena, that shows this video. I have some technical problems. As you see the results of the video, I'd like to say that among the buildings and the structures that had suffered after the war, there was no military or army objects. All objects, it was private houses, private apartments, social and infrastructural facilities. And the main problems that we faced of today, it was people who had left their home. I was told that approximately 8,000 people left homeless, and before the war, approximately 70,000 people was living in Irpin, and during Russian invasion and after the 24th of February, 40,000 people left the city. They were evacuated. From the, probably you know about Irpin Bridge. It was known as the path of life, because all people who left the city, they were crossing this bridge, and 19 people died there, and they were killed by Russian soldiers and Russian bombs and mines. That bridge became a symbol of courage and show that our city will stand and will fight for our future. We have a presidential initiative to make a memorial complex there to remind all citizens and all people all over the Ukraine and of course all over the world what had happened in our city. The war showed us our weak places, but nowadays we are trying to reconstruct, to renovate, and to bring life in most damaged territories. We have already give an opportunity to set people in temporary buildings, but it's only not a big percent, only 10% of 8,000 people who can stay for temporary. But nowadays it's a big problem to find investments and find money to build to rebuild their houses and to give them opportunity to return to their own homes. Also, I'd like to say that among the private apartments and private houses, also there was destroyed infrastructural and social facilities, our schools, kindergartens, and it's one of the problems that people, even if their house are still alive, are still not damaged, they don't want to come back because there are no school nearby their house, there is no kindergarten nearby their house, and it's very difficult to do in shortest way because the damages are very huge, and we need to provide an project to find money to do in some works over this kindergarten school, so it's quite difficult. Of course, the main problems is not only in temporary houses, but a leak of budget. Now, before the war, our city was in top 10 cities in Kyiv region by the budget, and we were quite rich city before the war, and we quite for the last 5 years we have done a lot of work. We create some parks, squares, we create waterfront on the Irpin river. Also, we built 2 new modern kindergartens and reconstruct our 2 schools. So for the last 5 years, it was a great number of structural and infrastructural facilities. But nowadays, when people left, when all infrastructural buildings damaged, the budget didn't take incomes. So it's quite difficult to do some projecting or to do some reconstruction works in shortest way, because we have to provide some other things that help us to do projects over these buildings. I'd like to say in such way. If it's possible, we'd like to say that such panels will help us to connect with people and to take part in practical experience and to take the realization of the boldest ideas of all people. And I think that it will help us to provide and to reconstruct our city in shortest possible time. So it's very, very important for our city. And I think that and I think I and all our administration is hope for supporting and the beginning of cooperation in some cases, of course. If you have any question, I'd like to answer them.
Ми дуже вам дякую. Ми не можемо
Yes,
обійти
thank you so much. We know that we would like to have some questions, even I know that we will not have time for the discussion for the other speakers as well. We're slightly out of schedule, but still, I would like to have at least one question for you as well. Have you been using the tools and opportunities that the changes to our legislation has given you? Like now we have these complex restoration plans and detailed territory plans, and how the community is participating in that. So if I may, I will switch back to Ukrainian. So basically speaking about the detailed territory plans and the changes for the legislation, there is one big problem that even though it has been written already on the paper, but the thing is that we need to have the public hearings as well. So there has to be the town hall as well. So this is procedure that has to be held in the civilized world, but the thing is that it has to last for 30 days as it's written in our legislation. So it doesn't give us the opportunity to be very flexible in meeting those challenges that we currently have. So at this stage, I cannot say that, in any way that this procedure is helping us to facilitate the restoration process. And at the same time, I just wanted to say that another problem that we have faced, and one of the problems that has been already told about the financial support. We need to have this direct financial support and direct finances to be allocated to the affected community so that you could be effectively resolving the problems in the specific locations on renovation, or even for the procuring of the existing housing in order to provide the houses to the people as fast as possible. And unfortunately, it doesn't work this way like this today. So we have the most of the money there are right now being consolidated in the regional budgets, not the local budgets. So we have certain moments still in this case as well that doesn't give us the flexibility to make these decisions as soon as possible. Yes, thank you. We have another question from the chat, I think, but if you had a choice, what would be the 3 most important things for you? What would that be, except for the money? What would that be? Well, equipment would be, because basically right now we have faced this biggest problem in our municipal utility companies, that 90% of all of our machinery has been fully destroyed. We don't have cars, we don't have tracks. It's not a construction equipment that we have, it's just the service cars that are left. So this is one of the biggest problems that we have. And this problem, like, for example, we have this moments when we have a 9-story building and it has been damaged on the 9th floor. And we don't have this physical capacities of how we can restore this one part of the concrete plate that has been basically damaged. So around the cities, we don't have this machine to actually get there. You know, we know that the cost of this work, if we will get the professional construction equipment to do that, that will be very expensive. But technically, we cannot find the alternative to this equipment. So basically, I think that the most important thing, you know, even everything is important. We need money, we need people, but we need equipment, we need machines as well. You know, we have the professionals. We have a lot of professionals who are ready to do that, who know how to do that, who can do that. But unfortunately, they don't have the tools to do that. They don't have the machines. Thank you. Thank you, Mykhailo. Thank you so much. We will continue with our next presentations, and I would like to pass the floor to Grzegorz Gajda, who is the senior expert for the development from the European Investment Bank. He has started to work there in 2016, but before that, Grzegorz has been working with EBRD and International Financial Corporation of the World Bank. He has studied economy, but he has been in Ukraine for multiple years, and he is working with the budgeting projects for local communities, and he has been participating in the public finances reform as well. So we hope that Grzegorz Gajda is going to give us a little bit of ideas of what affordable housing is, of how can we use the housing to build up the social canvas of society. So why the housing is important for the community. So please, Grzegorz, the floor is yours.
Дійсно,
Yes,
через
thank
10
you,
років моєї
for
праці в
sure.
Україні у секторі ЖКХ
Throughout the 10
я
years
мав
of my
можливість
work in Ukraine,
подивитися детально.
I'm sorry, Grzegorz, can we ask you to get you on the screen? We do not see you on the screen somehow. Yes, please continue.
Так, то я мав можливість подивитися детально, як працює система ЖКХ в Україні, як виглядає у практиці радянська спадщина, що з цією радянською спадщиною, яка була переформатована.
Я дуже перепрошую, що перебиваю вас, вибачте, будь ласка, але я ще раз хочу попросити вас обрати канал перекладу. Переклад українська, Interpretation Ukrainian. Тому
так,
що
я
ми
маю,
чуємо
я це
вас.
маю.
Ви обрали переклад українська?
Так, я вибрав переклад українською. Я не знаю, як зробити це краще.
Дякую.
Продовжувати?
Так, будь ласка.
Добре, дякую. Добре, повертаючись до речей.
So,
так, тобто то, що я зміг
so
працювати з чим?
having this
Це
opportunity
радянська
to
система,
work
яка була в якось
in
часі
Ukraine was the
переформатована
Soviet system that has been
ринковими
reformed
реформами початку 90-х років, які були
with the
не
reforms that
завершені.
we've had at the beginning of the
В моїй праці
90s that
в
haven't been
Україні
completed
з
fully. Throughout my work
ЄБРР і з групою
in
Світового банку
Ukraine with
ми
EBRD
мали
and with
змогу
World
в
Bank
якоїсь
Group,
степені
we've had this opportunity to
довести хоча б частку цих реформ до кінця, в
work on
основному
these
в
reforms.
області управління житлом.
And we've tried to
Но
manage the
що я
main
можу сказати?
housing zones as well,
Система
the house
зачіпає
management
дуже
systems
багато
as well.
різних
But what I
інших
wanted to
систем. Тобто
say
система
that the system
енергобезпеки
uses
і
the
взагалі
different systems
енергетичних
as well,
ринків,
the systems of
система
energy
надання
consumption, the
соціальної
systems of
допомоги
the
теж
providing of the
зачіпляється
social
житловою
aid
реформою.
that is also being covered by this housing
В
reform.
той сам час я міг спостерігати
And in the
дуже
same
швидкий
time,
розвиток
what I
приватного
was
сектору
seeing, that I've
будівництва.
seen the really fast
Ми всі,
development
напевно,
of
бачили,
the
як швидко
private
розвивалася,
construction sector.
як швидко
We might
розвивалися
have
житлові
seen
райони
how
України,
the
фінансовані грошима
residential districts in Ukraine have
економічних
been
мігрантів.
developed, how we have used
людей, які вкладають гроші в будівництво і збереження, інвестиції, фінансовані іпотечними кредитами. Ми могли побачити, як швидко, як ефективно впроваджує інвестиційні проєкти приватний сектор. Взагалі, Україна через свої революції і суспільні процеси перейшла дуже міцно в таку систему економічного розвитку, яка базується на приватній ініціативі, на приватному секторі. Одночасно, коли я завершив свою роботу в Україні, я мав змогу працювати з розвинутими системами житлової політики в Західній Європі. Те, що там спостерігається, це те, що...
Вибачте, будь ласка, що я знову вас перебиваю, я перепрошую, але просто не виходить у нас чомусь, накладається переклад. Чи могли б ви перейти на англійську мову, якщо вам так буде зручно?
Значить, почати говорити англійською мовою?
Почати говорити англійською і спробувати знов-таки обрати переклад, але вже англійська.
Okay, so I've done it. Right?
Thank you.
So now I can continue in English, and please confirm if it's working okay.
Super.
Okay, very good. Okay, so what I was saying in Ukrainian, let me just try to get into English a little bit. So in Western Europe, which has developed housing systems, but based on another principle of much more balanced supply of housing between various sectors of economy, which is private, public, and the third sector, so sector of non-profitable organizations and cooperatives. Within this balance, what is really the focus of the housing policies over there is housing affordability. Also, looking at the sector from more systemic point of view, what we can see is that housing is a type of product for which the supply is very strongly inelastic, which means in practice that demand stimulation in case of housing very often leads to price increase rather than to increase of volume. So housing systems in Western Europe focus on supplementing the supply rather than focusing on the demand side. Having said that, we have to be clear that private sector typically is much more efficient than the public sector, especially in the countries of transition economies. So when we talk about reconstruction of Ukraine, we will inevitably be facing issues. How do we balance efficiency in reconstruction and social factors such as affordability, general fairness of housing policies, and trying to put together a system that will provide some foundations for the future. I mean, this will be the type of choices that Ukrainian policymakers will have to make. I guess that I would 100% subscribe to what Mr. Dzhygyr said in his opening speech, that rebuilding Ukraine as it was before, maybe slightly prettier, is going to be a missed opportunity to put together a foundation for a successful nation, for a successful society. Now, how this can be done? I think this should be done by putting together the parts of societies that have already been very active in building Ukraine, the successful country that we all know, which is the society, which is the researchers, the research institutions. I think Ukraine has shown its power in bringing these various players to a discussion. So I think that in this platform, we can discuss going forward how we want to do it. But I would like to share just few things about experiences of public or more non-market housing from Western Europe. These systems are built taking affordability as the beginning of the discussion. So people with income lower than average, people with other forms of vulnerability, unstable jobs, big families, single mother families. These groups are taken into account, and then housing offer is being tailor-made for this group. And the housing costs are tailored by political decision in such a way that it is affordable to these people. And then the challenge is how to do the system that is financially sustainable, but at the same time provides affordability. And here, I'm sure that the other speaker, Mr. Wolfgang Amann, will be able to share his insight. This is what really is well practiced in the markets that he is knowledgeable about. But we here at the EIB are financing those systems, and it can be done. I can maybe say this, that it can be done. We provide about 1 to 3 billion euros of financing to those systems on annual basis, and we can say that the systems are actually quite efficient in being able to deliver good quality and affordable housing, and they're also able to maintain good quality of this housing during its lifetime. So this is something that that we would like to share with the civil society of Ukraine and the policymakers, how the system can be put in place and offer this type of housing. Maybe just to finish it all, what is really important when the systems are designed very well is also a topic of social inclusion. I think that we can see from previous experience in Ukraine is that implementation of housing without public intervention leads to emergence of areas of very expensive real estate and areas that are populated by poorer people, which leads to situations of kind of ghettos. I mean, those gated communities that started appearing around Ukrainian cities is definitely something that would lead to social exclusion and divisions in society. And I think we don't want that. And also there are calculations which show that these divisions actually cost money, and it costs a lot of money to bring people back together. So for future redevelopment of Ukraine, I think that we should avoid this at all cost. Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Grzegorz. And I think that the problems that you raised are really powerful, are really important. But getting back to these brief questions that we would like to ask you straight away. You know, the first question would be, do you have the money prepared for the reconstruction of Ukraine? But getting back to the topic of your presentation, I just wanted to ask you, whether do you have the objective system of evaluation of inclusivity of the housing systems and affordability of the housing system while it's still on the discussion, while it's still in the planning stage, not when it's already completed?
So when it comes to money, yes, the EIB, the European Investment Bank, has already been financing reconstruction of Ukraine after the war of 2014, and we have provided over 3 billion euros in various credit lines for various sectors for the reconstruction. And these reconstruction processes are continuing. Actually, as we speak, projects financed with those credit lines are being financed and implemented. So it is obviously reasonable to expect that after this war is over, we will be involved again at much higher scale. Now, coming back to the systems, yes, the affordability measure, I think the one that is most popularly used in European Union is the one applied by Eurostat, which looks at 40% of population income spent on housing-related expenses as a limit of housing affordability. And we look at this measure when we compare systems, when we finance those projects. Of course, you can do it divided by various locations, various social groups, various tenancy options. So ownership, rental on social basis, ownership with mortgage or without. So these are the tools that we use. yeah, I don't know what else I can say given this brief time that we have today.
Дякую. Наразі
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for that. But basically, but your evaluation only presupposes, just for us not to get into further on discussion, I think that we would like to switch to our next speaker, who's going to be giving us the program as well of how can we engage additional capital and what would be the basis for the new capital engagement. I think we will add up a little bit of time to our general discussion. We'll try to be very brief still. Just to give the time for our final speaker today, because we have a very distinguished speaker who has a lot of knowledge on the transitional economy countries. He had a number of projects on the private and public sectors collaboration in the Balkan countries, in Caucasus, in Central Asia, in Russia. So now we have the expert who is the expert on the transitional economy and emerging markets economy. So we have Wolfgang Amann, who is the managing director of the Institute of Real Estate Construction and Housing. So Wolfgang, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I did also do several projects on Ukraine commissioned by IIBW in 2015 to 2017. I was active in introducing the energy performance certificates in Ukraine, and also in developing housing management schemes in the Ukraine. So let me share 3 slides with you. I will talk about some perspectives for the Ukraine to tap this opportunity. You know, I really was shocked about the film Michael Sapon showed to us. But despite all those destruction and all those black and white between what we saw before the war, the 5 years of flourishing Ukraine and now this destruction, despite of all this, it is an opportunity to have a restart. And as Yuriy mentioned, it will be essential for the future of Ukraine, not simply to come back to the solutions of before, but to reintroduce things which will be a leverage for future prosperity, for future development, for future happiness of your people. So regarding the preconditions in the Ukraine, before the war, there have been some 20 million housing units. Destruction was massive, as we have heard from Svitlana Startseva. I think until now, some 500,000 units are concerned from destruction and damage. At the same time, the housing industry in Ukraine is very capable. We saw in 2021 more than 150,000 housing completions in the Ukraine, and even in 2022 in the west of Ukraine, the housing industry is very, very active still. So this is an extremely important precondition for the time after the war. At the same time, we see that there is a very strong focus of people on housing ownership. So whomever you ask in the Ukraine, he will answer that if he has the choice, he will take home ownership instead of a rental housing. And as you all know, and as you have mentioned, Svitlana Startseva, there is an ownership rate of far above 90%. At the same time, we see deficient schemes of housing management. There are hardly any owners associations, even though the legal regulations are in place. And of course, we have a very difficult situation with energy. The energy bills are very high. The share of energy on household consumption is much higher than in Western Europe. And in current times, of course, decarbonization is not only a question of climate change, but even more a question of independence from Russia and independence from delivery of gas from abroad. We have also heard that there is hardly any social housing so far, and that there is no third sector housing. Grzegorz Gajda told about this, and I only can confirm what he has mentioned. If we have a look on international developments, we can see quite different approaches on affordable housing. Basically, you can distinguish 5 different approaches. One is affordable land provision. We see quite successful models in the USA, in Canada, in France. There is another approach to employ the private sector in providing affordable housing. Again, the model of low-income housing tax credits in the United States works quite efficient. And also in Malaysia, there is a quite successful scheme with, meanwhile, more than 1 million housing units realized in this way. We have as a third approach public rental housing, and Vienna, my hometown, has an international good practice in this respect, where the public, the city itself, is owner of big stocks of affordable housing. And also in Sweden, we see a very, very successful scheme of municipal housing companies. Greg has mentioned these third sector providers, and here we can see quite successful models in France, the HLM sector, in the Netherlands, the Wohnungscooperatie, and also in Austria with our limited profit housing associations. They also have realized 25% of the housing stock in Austria, so very, very successful in quantitative terms. But the fifth approach is of specific interest for the Ukraine from my point of view, and this is asset-based welfare regimes. This means that public welfare targets at private ownership of housing. This is not a contradiction, but it works quite well. We have a very successful model in Singapore, where roughly 60% of the housing stock is realized with this scheme, where not only housing, but also pension system and social infrastructure is linked together. And another quite interesting model is applied in Finland with stock companies, housing stock companies. So if we come back to the Ukraine, from my point of view, it is important to understand that it is simply impossible to copy-paste one of those models which I have mentioned to the Ukraine. Actually, the only chance to create sustainable solutions is to invent a system by new, which is tailor-made for the situation in Ukraine. But certainly, you can learn from international good practice. First of all, I would recommend to you to define the targets of rehousing the Ukraine and to find some kind of consensus in society about the targets. This is, for example, what total number of new construction do you intend to have, and what share of affordable housing should be included in this? I think there is no question about that no fossil fuels should be applied in new construction, so 0, and at the same time, measures to decarbonize the existing housing stock. You should discuss and come to a solution whether your new system should be market-driven, or whether you intend and you think it is possible to establish a social housing regime which is in competition with the private market. then you should think about whether you intend to have primarily market financing schemes, or whether you want to introduce, for example, a state housing fund and introduce some affordable housing financing schemes. And finally, it will be necessary to decide whether your model, the Ukrainian model of affordable housing, should be focused on owner-occupied housing, or whether you want to introduce additional rental schemes for those who are not eligible for own property. If you come to the result that you want to introduce an affordable housing scheme, there are several questions to be answered. As I have mentioned, there are eligible models of asset-based welfare with full ownership titles for the tenants. And this is actually what I, from the present point of view, I would recommend to the development of a new scheme in the Ukraine. It is for sure the one model which is mostly wanted from your people. But at the same time, I think it will be possible to introduce PPP approaches to organize construction, to organize housing management, to organize refurbishment schemes, financing, and social targeting. I think it is possible to bring those targets together. We do have such models with owner-occupied housing, which is organized in a cooperative way, for example, in Austria. And it is also possible to apply international financing schemes on this kind of PPP approaches. So I would recommend to learn from successful models in Singapore, Finland, or Austria, and to create this joint endeavor to create this framework conditions, then to realize some pilots, then to evaluate those pilots, then to reshape the scheme, and finally to scale up in a way that you will come back to the great performance which you had the previous years. This is about new construction, and what we have seen in the movie of Mr. Sapon, it is very obvious that you also need measures for reconstruction of the damaged housing stock, and for this, of course, you need very, very quick solutions. I'm not quite sure whether a new scheme of affordable housing will qualify for these quick solutions for the damaged apartment houses, but I think those targets could be merged. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward for your response and questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Wolfgang. Thank you so much for your speech and for your presentation. I do believe that this is very important story on engaging different capital, on engaging as much capital as possible and as diverse capital as possible. But you have said it the right way in the end, that we do not have a lot of time for a lot of experiments as well. You know, we don't have this full fault-free model. We don't have time for that in most of the cases. But in your point of view, and I think that Grzegorz has already noted that down, when the credits are going to be restored, when the loans can be provided, what would be the prerequisites and preconditions for that to be renewed? Because we have outlined that every country has its unique conditions and its unique experience, but maybe you can draw some experience from the Balkans or the other countries that also experienced a conflict. What would you advise when the financial support will be restored?
As a matter of fact, in the places where the war has taken place, it is not possible to start right away. But big parts of the Ukraine are not affected or hardly affected from the war, and at the same time there is a great influx of internally displaced people. So the western parts of the Ukraine. Why not to start new schemes of new construction in the western parts of the Ukraine? Right away, I mean, right away.
Чудова думка.
That's a good idea, actually. I think that, those people who are in Ukraine right now, that maybe you have noticed that on the safe territory or the territory that have been liberated, we have seen that the construction companies, they have now renewed their work as well. So I think that right now are reevaluating their risks. When we will see that the situation is stable enough, so I think that when the financial institutions and private equity will believe that situation is stable enough, when will this time come? What should be the reasons for them to believe in Ukraine again?
From my point of view, there is no contradiction to start right away. And Gregor, what is your point of view? If we talk about the western parts of Ukraine, would this be a place where EIB could already invest money?
Well, that is actually a question which is quite a difficult one. I mean, depending who would be the borrower for us. At the moment, we have existing credit lines that are still under implementation. It is virtually impossible at the moment, given the way we operate, to put in place a new credit line in place in Ukraine. This may change if European leaders take decisions to accelerate these processes. But what I can say is, there is also an elephant in the room, okay? Western Ukraine is a place that has substantial supply of housing that are unoccupied. I mean, a resource to house people to some extent is present physically on the ground already. This resource should be unblocked, and we can discuss how it could be done, what would be the best tool to do it, rather than build anything new. The ideas that should really be taken into consideration would really focus on infills, building in places that should be built up anyway, not create temporary structures to the extent possible. Yeah, I guess this would be a couple of initial ideas, but I guess this is a huge topic to discuss, really.
So from my point of view, one important step could be to advise the leaders of Ukraine to address Western Europe, that they would start reconstruction right away in those parts of Ukraine which are not affected from the war. If Western governments, Western European governments would come to the result that support to the Ukraine could be channeled in parallel in winning the war and reconstructing those parts which are not subject to the war, I think could be very helpful to strengthen the Ukraine and to give a perspective to the people of Ukraine.
That's a great idea. That's a great point of view that you voiced out. I think that the financial market, as all of the market, they all influenced by emotions and sentiments. And so if Ukrainian government and our financial recipients will be good enough to get it, then we have some place for discussion and we can find some projects there as well. But, when the first project starts, the other will follow. So I think that this is the good end for our panel, as of now. We have taken 10 minutes more than our schedule, but if you don't mind, I would like to pass the floor for a very brief comment to my colleague of Grzegorz Gajda. I would like to pass the floor to Katerina. Just a second, I just want to read Katerina's surname in the right way. So please, Katerina Zisimopoulou, if you're here with us, you wanted to add a couple of the comments as an architect, you wanted to add up your point of view to the problem of the reconstruction of Ukraine, please.
Hello, hello from me. It was a very interesting discussion. Thank you for inviting me. I just watched Mykhail's video with great interest. It is a powerful tool to give us the whole picture of what is going on, a video, I mean. So I just wanted to emphasize place an emphasis on three things, three key points from an architect's perspective in the reconstruction process that could be taken into account. One is architectural heritage. The second is environmental sustainability and community engagement. All three have been more or less addressed. I think they go hand in hand. If you ask me, the respect for heritage and the environment and engaging the community in the reconstruction process are crucial for the success and for building a new condition, a new country that is not exactly a replica of the old, as was mentioned already, and I quote this, which is very important. So as an architect, I have a great respect for the architectural heritage of Ukraine, but of course there are community organizations and institutions that know much better than me what is important. And I was very happy to hear that the new environmental sustainability legislation is put in force. I think the public consultation process, if it is taking place at the moment, it could be also very useful to identify heritage issues, cultural heritage assets that could be preserved and function as landmarks during the reconstruction process. And in my opinion, engaging the key stakeholders of the community, if they are professional chambers like architects chambers or universities and ecologists, activists, or even women's organizations in the public consultation process is very important. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure and an honor to be part of this panel, and I hope the situation was better, but as it is also a chance to do things better, in my opinion. I give the floor to you, Oleh.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Katarina. And that was really important comments, especially in improving the participation of the community and especially on outlining that we need to have the plan map, that we need to have the urban planning that would be close for all of the people who would be using it in the future. So I do believe that we have covered a lot of important questions, and we've tried to answer to some of the most important and relevant questions, and how to start looking for the financial support for the new projects. We didn't want to talk about the temporary shelter for the people. We want to talk about the long-term perspective, even though we understand that the short-term shelters is a biggest part of our everyday operations for the ministries and for the local communities. We understand that trying to resolve the long-term problems, we're trying to cover the short-term problems as well, and trying to provide the housing for the people, trying to provide a shelter in summer and warm place during the winter, for especially all the people who are left homeless right now. But I do believe that we will continuing answering these questions of how to get it centered around the person, around individual, around families, and around the communities that our people build. We will discuss it in our third panel. And I think that our panel on how we can organize this rehousing process will be closed today. Thank you very much for your participation, and sorry for being slightly out of schedule. And I would like to wish us victory and join us at the next panel. Thank you. Thank you.